Hello, everyone, and welcome. You have chosen the SCS City Sports Podcast, your destination for local sports news, be it high school, be it professional, or whether you just want to listen to us ramble on about professional wrestling or old Seinfeld quotes or crazy movies that we all like. Welcome to the SCS City Sports Podcast, brought to you by the fine folks at Gary Thacker Insurance over at 2382 Battlefield Parkway. You can reach them at 706-866-8283. Also, the Chattanooga Flower Market, 8016 East Brainerd Road, 423-899-2440. Phil's Primetime Pizza down in beautiful Chickamauga, Georgia, 122 Gordon Street. That's 706-375-4448. Our good friend Greg Payne, host of Restricted to the Dugout with Greg Payne and the Payne Mortgage Team. You can reach them at 423-645-9404 for all of your mortgage needs. And finally, Choo Choo Barbecue, who make it possible for us to bring you the scoreboard on Friday nights. The Choo Choo Barbecue of Chickamauga scoreboard. You can reach them at 12960 U.S. Highway 27 at 706-375-7675. And as Ringo Rob likes to say, you don't know Q until you know Choo Choo. We also want to say a special thank you to Matthew Mays and the good friends and members of Jupiter Coyote, one of our favorite bands, and they provide the music for the show. Those guys have always been great to us, and we hope you guys will reach out and try to check out their music as well. So sit back and relax and hold on, and we'll see where we get to. And welcome, everybody, to this Thursday night edition, SCS City Sports Podcast. Rusty, Scott, and Rob joining you live out of Studio X. Glad to be with you. We got a lot to talk about, a lot of football playoffs coming up this weekend. I think there was a pretty large football game this past weekend, couple pretty large football games with some pretty unexpected results. We had NFL action. We've got everything in the brother going on right now. So where do you guys even want to start? I mean, we had Jeff Jarrett shows up on AEW a week or so ago. I mean, you got, it's just everything's all over the place.
Jarrett's a lot like,
a bad coin. He always turns up.
The Nature Boy and some others, they just don't want to let it go. Mm-hmm. They when they sit home and they watch it, it's probably just boiling their system.
Jeff Jarrett's not that old, though.
I got to get back up.
Jarrett, is in phenomenal.
He is in phenomenal shape.
And if you saw the Ric Flair's last match.
Mm-hmm.
My first thought was, why is he not wrestling?
He said, so he was on, not to go off on a complete wrestling tangent, which we can do, but we're going to for a minute. He was on the Stone Cold podcast here about maybe a couple months ago, and they talked about everything. His run in TNA, him starting the company, the whole thing. And Stone Cold remarked of how good a shape he was in. He's been clean and sober now for a number of years. Mm-hmm. And Stone Cold asked him, he said, after the Ric Flair match, he said, is there anything left? And he said, if the right opportunity presented itself, I'd like to have one more run. And some people took that and ran, and there were a lot of people on the internet saying, if you're going to let him do one last run, bring him back to WWE and put him in a feud with AJ Styles. Because for one, they have unbelievable chemistry together in the ring. And for number two, AJ never hurts anybody. He is one of the safest guys out there. And if you're going to put a Hall of Famer in the ring with somebody, put him in the ring with a guy that's going to keep him safe.
Well, all that makes sense. But then again, he might come back just as we watched the other night, maybe as a strong mouthpiece.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody that does a few things outside the ropes and not inside the ropes.
Well, and every now and again throws that thumb to the eye outside, a la old school Jim Cornette and the tennis racket, that kind of stuff. Well, if folks out there, if you're wrestling fans like we are, and I'll say it again, I've plugged that show 3 or 4 times, but if you haven't watched Tales from the Territories yet, you have missed out. I'm an episode behind right now. I've got to watch the Stampede Wrestling when I haven't watched it yet. I watched the Florida one last week, and that one was incredible.
Yeah.
To hear Kevin Sullivan talking about his descent into the crazy character that he became, and how in the kayfabe days he would literally go to the grocery store dressed as the Army of Darkness with the dog collar on Nancy in the buggy with him as they walked around and grabbed milk and eggs.
Did not want to let that slip away.
No, I mean,
everybody believed it,
and that shows you how committed those guys were in those days.
And same thing, I've seen the Stampede episode. I watched it today, and Bret Hart was talking about when he was younger. He wasn't smartened up to the business yet, and said the milkman would come to the door. Well, his dad was still wrestling at the time, Stu Hart, and they did an angle where this guy broke Stu Hart's arm. And to keep the facade going, he's like, the milkman was at the door. And he said, Dad's running around, where's my cast? Where's my cast? Where's my cast? And he finally finds the cast, and he puts it on, and he's like, yeah, I'm starting to realize maybe this isn't exactly, what it all seems to be. He said, but, Friday night we're back at the arena, and I'm sitting in the crowd again, and sure enough, he said, I believed it. And his dad was in a feud with Abdullah the Butcher. Abdullah was one that was doing the talk. It was him and David Schultz, No Class Bobby Blass, and Bret Hart. And
No Class Bobby Blass. Good
They
Lord.
talked about how he got the nickname, too, which was hilarious. But he said Abdullah is just hitting his dad and kicking and biting, and all the stuff that Abdullah used to do. And he said, I'm like 11 years old, and I see my dad getting beat up, and he said, I can get close enough to kick him. So I kicked Abdullah in the back of the leg about 3 times, and he finally spun around and looked and saw, and I think realized that's one of Stu Hart's kids. Don't touch him. Don't touch him. His buddy's like, you probably shouldn't be doing that. You probably shouldn't be doing that.
You bring up a great regional name in Abdullah, but I don't recall if he ever made it to the WWE.
No, I don't think he ever even made an appearance.
And I think that's why his national ranking of all-time crazy bad guys might be not in the top 10, but he really would.
And he really should be in the top 2 or 3. Bruiser Brody, Abdullah.
But maybe because Abdullah didn't get to that show and stay in that limelight.
I don't know, but he went everywhere else. And Abdullah was from Windsor, Ontario, Canada, and they brought him in, and of course he was just.
Now he lives in Atlanta.
Yeah,
Atlanta, GA,
barbecue place.
Well, I got you. You did brought up a name there, and I've got you the trivia question on that one. What's David Schultz's biggest claim to fame?
Oh, he was the guy that smacked John Stossel.
John Stossel, that's right, on 2020.
Mom made me watch that. She taped it. She made me watch that 100 times. See?
2020 did an investigative...
Here's what you're watching. I was like, yeah, it doesn't bother me.
They did an investigative report on professional wrestling. And
that clip is on there.
And he was basically defending the business. Vince had more or less sent him in that direction. And he slapped the piss out of John Stossel.
John Stossel said, I think it's fake. And he said, you think it's fake? And he just open hand smacked him
right across the face.
Stossel said he busted his eardrum and everything else. But get back to Abdullah. Abdullah, his claim was he was, the man from
Sudan, the bad man from Sudan.
And he didn't speak English, so he would just, do this gibberish stuff back and forth or whatever. He said he went to this diner all the time in Canada. And he was keeping up the kayfabe, so he would look at the menu and go egg, he wants eggs. Okay, he's trying to say bacon. Oh, he wants bacon. He said this went on for a long time, and finally his waitress walks up to him and just got close to him and said, "Look, Abdullah, I know you can talk and speak English. I won't tell anybody, but just tell me what you want."
I want a number 3.
Well, the funny thing about Abdullah is you especially when you see him on any of the things now. I mean, he has train tracks on his head. Oh, I mean, you can stand quarters.
He played in that world to do that.
You can stand quarters up in the holes in his head.
So obviously, we would say that he might have bled as much as anybody.
Oh,
top 10 bleeders.
Oh, I think he is.
Flair might be in that club.
Flair's
up there.
He would do
Carlos Colon.
Carlos Colon,
anybody down there.
Dusty Rhodes.
Would
go along with it.
Anybody that was down there and
the Von Erichs
went down there.
Oh God, down there that was. If you didn't spill blood down there, you weren't wrestling. What about the night they had the? What about the night they had the Inferno match? Was the Sheik? That was in that. Of course, that was in Japan, but that was that. You talk about crazy. the whole damn ring was on fire, and every time somebody would get body slammed, it would make the flames grow higher and higher, and the damn mat was basically melting off the top of the surface of the ring as they were fighting this match, because Sabu was the Sheik's tag team partner in that match.
And some of that stuff did not get tested.
New Jack had to have been a pretty high on that list of bleeders.
Oh, yeah.
Who?
New Jack from ECW.
Well, anybody on ECW.
Yeah, true.
Guys, that's right. Mankind, Foley, yes.
Foley,
they
yeah,
would
golly.
absolutely be in that. But that, what you're just saying is that's a great idea that we didn't test it long enough to see if those little things might not happen.
Oh yeah. Well, again, I mean the show is it's something. I mean, watching the last couple of years has been a great time frame for wrestling documentaries, with the way that WWE's gone back in and done the Warrior and Stone Cold and Shawn and then the and the hidden treasures ones that they did, where they were going out and trying to find the memorabilia from all these guys. The Andre the Giant one, where they find the mask that he wore in Japan as the Giant Machine, and they found, I mean, one of Jake's snake bags. There's, some of the stuff that they found on those shows, being able now to go back and watch all that, it makes you realize how lucky we really were as young men and kids, back in that time, of who we got to watch, because we got to see the tail end of one group of legends and the beginning of another group of legends. I mean, the one about the AWA, when they talk about, Bockwinkel and Vern and Greg Gagne and the Bee, who would later become the Killer Bees, B. Brian Blair and Brunzell, and then, they didn't even mention Big Scott Hall and Kurt Hennig and all the Hulk Hogan.
Talking about how Flair had basically quit. He had quit on Vern Gagne, said he couldn't handle it anymore, and said Vern went to his house and Flair opened the door and Vern just smacked him and said, "Get your bag and get back in there."
They talked about that on. Well, I mean, Rick tells that story on the ESPN
and they
documentary.
Were talking about what kind of Kevin Sullenberg said, what kind of future would the wrestling business be in right now if Flair had just not gone back?
Who would have taken his place?
Well, it's
who would have done it?
It's a lot of. I mean, Dusty probably would have been. Dusty would have been big.
Well,
but I mean, as far as
Flair is Flair's place,
no,
for the time that Flair was out there,
I think Ric Flair
brings up a good question there, Scott. If Ric Flair did not come back from quitting, who would have took his place in history?
There would have been no Four Horsemen. There would have been.
I think Flair is the all-time, to me. I mean, of course, he's the all-time greatest. But I think he is also the all-time best gray area wrestler ever, because for a number of his career, even though he was the villain, he was just as loved as anybody in the arena. And, he was the original. I mean, is he a good guy this week? Is he a bad guy this week? I mean, the whole dirtiest player in the game fit a lot of times, but there were a lot of times when, he'd run in and help Dusty, or he'd run in and help somebody. It just, he was such a good, just likable, one of those guys, man. I mean, and then I think Magnum. That, to me, that's always going to be. If the biggest what ifs. That's a good one. The biggest what ifs, and I think Magnum's top of that list.
I cannot recall enough of his body work, to be honest. I knew he got
belly
hurt.
to belly suplex, man.
I knew he got hurt. I knew he, that took him out of the rest of his career. But I just can't remember enough matches about him to say how he would have gone on to be one of the greatest.
Well,
I just don't remember.
The motorcycle wreck, I mean, his career was probably...
It was a motorcycle wreck, wasn't it? I forgot about that.
It was a motorcycle wreck, and it probably 18 months was all his run really lasted. They brought him in. He was good looking, had the hair.
So he had 18 months in the business.
It was a little longer than that.
Maybe a little bit, but I'm talking about his main run.
Oh, yeah, because you had, he came in like as Dusty's... I don't want to say Dusty's sidekick, but basically he was Dusty's protege. And, there was remember the angle with Magnum and Dusty when they were the James Gang, and they come out under the black masks and pin Tully and Arn with side by side belly to belly suplexes, and then later on they unmask the the Midnight Riders and it was Tony Zane and the Italian Stallion or something, and then, Magnum had that long run that started at Starrcade that year when it was the best of 7 series for the United States Championship against Nikita. And that series is what really put Nikita Koloff over as a singles competitor instead of being one of the Russians with Ivan, because that's after they had brought Crusher Khrushchev in, Barry Darso, who would later go on and be Smash and the Repo Man and a bunch of other terrible characters that he got forced on him. Man. He was the Repo Man.
I do remember that.
No.
That 2-week run as the Repo Man.
He actually started in the NWA, talking about Magnum TA, in 1978. Went from there to Championship Wrestling from Florida, Pacific Northwest. Won some titles, Mid-South. He became Magnum TA, the American Heartthrob, named after Magnum PI, of course. Allen adopted the ring name after Andre the Giant suggested he combine the Magnum name. So it was Andre the Giant is the one that gave him the name. After competing in Mid-South, he won his first North American Heavyweight Championship, defeating Mr. Wrestling number 2 on May 13th.
Who would have been on the backside of his career?
May 13th, 1984. That's the main thing.
On the backside
he
of his
held
career.
the title for 5 months. He lost it to Big Cat Ernie Ladd.
Big Cat
and
Ernie Ladd.
And then he joined
Golly.
Jim Crockett Promotions in 1984.
Hey, let me say something right quick. We talked
then
about
had
Hogan not having
had the
wrestling
wreck in
skills.
87.
You just
86.
mentioned one.
Oh, yeah, Ernie Ladd, yeah.
At 0.
Yeah.
Well, Hogan, I
it
think...
was just two years there with the
I
Jim
think
Crockett
Hogan
Promotions.
doesn't get credit for what bit of wrestling skills he had. I don't think Hogan had a lot of wrestling skills, no. But I think Hogan took what he had and used it well, and he never... In the entire career of Hulk Hogan, there is no stories of him hurting somebody.
No.
I mean, he might have been one of the all-time safest wrestlers of all time with, realistically, what was his whole moveset? An overhand punch, the big boot, the leg drop, the body slam, the clothesline.
Repeat it.
Yeah, and lather, rinse, repeat. Get the hell beat out of you, Hulk up, and be done. I mean,
a lot of good stories on that AWA one about how they found him. How he used to come to the shows. He was in a band. He played guitar in a band.
Right, he was the bass player.
He was a bass player and just loved the business. And they brought him in and beat the crap out of him.
Somebody broke his leg.
But why he's on the top 4 list we had
Mount Rushmore.
Mount Rushmore is what he did for the popularity of the show. He took it from
whoever came up with training, saying your prayers, and eating your vitamins. All the little Hulkamaniacs. I mean,
he gave it to him.
That right there was because I'm telling you, as a kid of the 80s, and I wished I still had it somewhere, and I know Scott remembers coming to my house and seeing it. On my bedroom door until I was probably 14 or 15 years old, I had a poster of Hulk Hogan making the flex, wearing the 1980s era heavyweight title belt. Mm-hmm. It was a Pro Wrestling Illustrated fold-out. And it had the entire history of the World Wrestling Federation Heavyweight Championship up to Hulk Hogan. So it had San Martino, Nature Boy Buddy Rogers, Stan Stasiak, Bob Backlund, Sheik, the 7 or 8 guys that had held it to that point. It had a little blurb about each one of them and all, and then it was the poster of Hogan. And if you could find that poster now, I've looked it up recently. It's in the thousands, what it's worth.
Gotta be.
And moving past that, he would drop that belt to who?
Warrior first.
Warrior. Mm-hmm. He would drop.
Well, no, he dropped it. They took it from him. Or he lost it to Andre on the whole. Andre pinned him on the whole. Andre selling the title to DiBiase.
Yeah.
And then he took a clean pinfall to Warrior, and then he got it back, and then I think he beat Macho clean. He lost to The Undertaker clean. I think he beat Yokozuna one of the times. He beat him for it. And then I don't know who beat him that last time, because that was the last run that he had in WWE was soon after that.
And what we kind of remember... And
it may have been Yokozuna.
We talk about Roman Reigns carrying the belt as long as he's got to carry it. That's kind of what they did with Hulk.
Well, I mean, he
got
carried
to carry the belt a long time.
that first title run went from like 1978 or 79. No, I'm sorry, 1981, 82, something like that, to like 1984 or something. It was 2.5 or 3 years.
But then we used to see it change places quite often. But what's your theory on why Reigns has got to carry it so far? They just don't feel like they got another horse in the stable?
Well, I think all this time that they've been doing everything they could to make him who he is, when all of us out on this side of the screen have been yelling, if you'll make him a heel, he'll be one of the best ever. And look what has happened. They've made him a heel, and look how good he is as a heel. Having Paul Heyman with him where he doesn't have to talk. And I mean,
but he has gotten better at that.
Well, I mean, when you got a new set of chompers like he's got, I mean, I don't see how you can't talk. But, they just, I feel like they think he's the modern day Cena, and I think a lot of it is, I just don't think they want to get into the belt changing hands every 6 months or something like they did there for so long with Cena and with Brett and with The Miz and with
let's make it have a heavier value.
Yeah, let's have this one big guy that everybody else throws everything they got at him, because everybody says if you hadn't seen the match from Crown Jewel with Logan Paul, that Logan Paul gave him everything he had more.
Yeah, I saw a couple of
even Will Ospreay from New Japan was watching the match and had even posted on Twitter about how good a match it was. And I mean, he don't do that for just anybody.
No, I wish they would just go back. No SmackDown or Raw title, just one heavyweight title. That's all you need.
Well, and this and what's contradictory from the guy that up in Minnesota that would carry it for as long as he would, but yet not have to make appearances, not have to wrestle anybody. At least what they have done with Roman is that he shows up every week and he's involved in everything, not just a pay-per-view.
Well, I mean, one of the best storylines on television right now is Sami Zayn as an honorary Uso. that is one of the funniest things that they've got. The rumor now is what they keep saying is that the main event for WrestleMania this year is Roman Reigns The Rock. And they've talked about Roman dropping one of the two belts between now and then, but not the other one. And then maybe doing, something where they can get it back on another show or, And
I'd like to see them wrestle, but it doesn't need to be for the title. It doesn't need to be for the title.
No,
because
it
would
be.
Do
you want to see
do you want to see them get it?
No,
and then run back over and make a movie?
I don't want to see
How's
Rock
he gonna
win the
give
title.
it
Yeah, I'd love to see him back in the ring. I think it'd be a great match. But I have no interest in seeing him being the champion again.
I just want to see him in the ring.
Yeah.
And that's where we're at. We're all in the stage now that it's more nostalgia than anything. And I mean,
and Rock's daughter is now in NXT.
Yeah, she is a part of a new faction, right? They brought her out the other night. She was one of the Mia Yim is back. She's with AJ and Gallows and Anderson in the OC.
Yeah.
And you can tell now that Triple H, and I've actually watched Raw a couple times in the last few weeks, and you can tell that Triple H is the one pulling the strings now. The storylines are so much better. The personalities, all the bullcrap people have just been thrown the wayside. Case in point, Austin Theory can't buy his way on the TV, and they brought him out the other night for this half-hearted cash-in on the United States Championship that just went down the toilet. And I think every wrestling fan around was like, finally.
Yes.
Finally. This guy's horrible. I don't understand why Vince liked him. You're back to having the best of the best on TV, and you're getting good matches. They're not regurgitating the same match week in and week out like they were. It's just a better show. You can tell that Vince is not the one calling the shots. It's obvious.
Well, Triple H had plenty of time to think about how he would do something different because he's had to.
He's probably had that written down for weeks or months or years, and like, if I could just
if the old man will ever step down and let me have this.
All right, there was a big ball game last weekend.
Yep.
And the Vol Nation didn't play its best game, in my opinion, or did they play a team, Scott, that's just far cry superior to them?
I don't think they're that superior to them. They were the better team that day, But Tennessee made mistakes that Tennessee hadn't made all year, and there were overthrown passes that were just
sitting in the pocket way
6
too long.
6 inches, 12 inches away from being
and they
complete,
talked about
maybe touchdowns.
That offense was predicated on big play after big play after big play. But there's a bunch of 4 and 5 stars running around in those red jerseys that said to themselves, "I'm not going to get beat by this receiver."
Yeah.
And then I thought Hendon stood in the pocket way too long, way too often, and watched it just kind of fall apart.
Well, and then they didn't protect him, and they jumped too many times.
Oh, my goodness. And now we know what Bama felt like in Neyland because that's what they got.
I'll give Georgia credit, but I don't think they were heads and shoulders better. I don't think they're heads and shoulders better than Tennessee. Like I said, a couple of those passes hit. It's a different story.
Yeah. Those type of plays weren't taking place.
Are, whatever. And Georgia's probably going to go on and play for the SEC championship and probably be the favorite to win it. And for Tennessee, that's the best thing that can possibly happen.
Well, absolutely. And now all Tennessee needs to do is take care of Tennessee. And
they win the last 3 games convincingly.
And I hope they have that hangover over with. I hope they're back to playing really well.
Hooker had them down there, in the huddle as the game was wrapping up, and being a leader, which is something that program has sorely lacked for a while. And they got guys down there that'll lead the program. Now we'll see what happens on Saturday. They got a Missouri team that played Georgia tough. I still don't think they're that good. I think Tennessee should win that game pretty handily.
But you do think about that. They had a Missouri team that played Georgia really tough.
It's SEC. I mean, they're going to play them tough. The South Carolina game is going to be down there, and it's going to be a night game, and those people are going to be fired up. That'll be a tough one. Vanderbilt won't be.
and for Tennessee to take,
it just won't.
For Tennessee to take South Carolina's fan base out of there, they got to score early and often and get it over with.
And like I said, if they finish up 11-1, just for pure chaos, if I wasn't a Tennessee fan, I'd be interested to see what happens if LSU were to come back and win the SEC.
That is interesting because they are really getting a push lately.
You're 11-2, and you lost to this team by 4 touchdowns on your home field. So what are you going to do?
How many's on the committee?
12?
12, yeah.
What if there's a 6-6 split on that? Because I could see both half and half in that room. Debated it one way or the other.
Tennessee needs Texas to beat TCU this week, and then
I think you're going to get that.
Well, maybe
you can't trust Texas lately. Even as good as they seem to be getting, they keep losing ball games.
And of course, you got Michigan and Ohio State going to play each other, and one of them is going to have to lose.
And if one of them naturally lose that game in a really tight way. That team that lost is going to have a raising cane argument themselves.
If that's a 24-21 game, yeah. I mean, we're going to continue this debate until it goes to 12, and then once it gets to 12, we'll debate it some more because it should be 16, and it'll go to 16. And then, of course, UTC. If UTC beats Samford on Saturday, they've probably got, they should win the conference because, look, they should beat Western Carolina, and huge game for the Mocs. I didn't realize Chris Hatcher was the coach at Samford. Chris Hatcher, when I was in college at West Georgia, he was the quarterback for Valdosta State, and they were throwing the ball all over the place back then. And of course, he eventually became the coach at Valdosta State. Now he's moved up to Samford, so that ought to be an interesting ball game with a whole lot on the line because, like I said, if the Mocs win that one, they're probably going to go and win the conference.
Well, speaking of coaches, I don't know why it's just popped into my head, but obviously with Will no longer being where he was, where's a potential destination that we could see him? I mean, you talking about Samford and UTC and some of those. I mean, are we thinking that he goes back to that level as a coordinator, or does he get a nod somewhere like a Louisville or somewhere like that? Does he,
or can he find himself on a
or does he? Yeah, I mean,
a Power 5
Yeah,
staff.
I mean, can he be a quarterbacks coach
Can he
for
be on a staff somewhere?
Georgia or Alabama or something?
I don't think that they. You know how. Let's just use the SEC. I don't think he could find his way to an OC in the SEC with his
not
his
right
resume.
off the
Not
bat.
right now.
No,
but there's other ways to get to that spot.
yeah.
Or does another, mid-major?
Well, that was what I was going to
snap
say. Does somebody else take a chance on him as a head coach and just increase his, and it's kind of like, you look at the two guys that we have from this area right off the top of your head that we can name. Will took the route of going head coach. Courtney's taken the route of playing that positional coach, working my way up the ladder. Now he's up there at West Point and quietly doing a really good job up there.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Will wasn't the offensive coordinator at UTC. He was a receivers coach and recruiting
coordinator.
I don't recall him being the OC.
No, he went straight from that job to the head coach at Austin Peay.
Yeah.
Well, and
had such a great turnaround there that, of course,
he would if he was sitting here, he would tell us that you learn things about winning and from losing, and what was causing that slide to take place over there. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure he knows, and it's probably just.
Well, they won.
Wasn't
they
able
went
to get
the
the right
bowl
guys.
game that first year he was at Charlotte, but it's just sort of, sputtered since. And I heard somebody say the other day, I can't remember who said it. Maybe that program just tried to get too big, too quick. They're still a mid-major. I know it's a major market in Charlotte, but it's not a.
Well, that's a good point. It could have gotten over its head in scheduling too fast.
Well, it's no different than look how many people looked at Central Florida the way they did for as long as they did. Well, they're just there's that team down there. They're upstart. They're not going to be anything.
That's a perfect place to be
they
a head coach and win them.
It is because
they're in a league that they dominate because
and there's talent everywhere.
And that coach don't have to leave the state to get his ball players, and just like Malzahn, he will win there for a long time and be looked at as another job. Whereas that Auburn job, whoever goes there, you're on the clock. Mm-hmm. You ain't got 3 wins for us already.
Well, we'll
see what happens because they're going to go to the Big 12 here. By next year, they're going to be in the Big 12.
That's going to change them a little
now,
bit.
of course, Oklahoma is going to be out of there.
Still got a great state to recruit out of.
I mean, this year, it's not Texas, Oklahoma. It's not Texas, Oklahoma. It's TCU and Kansas State are the main.
The
ones.
whole story of some of these coaching changes and different schools, the way different schools look at coaches and things like that. I mean, you take, I'm a Kentucky fan, so you take Stoops. Stoops has done a hell of a job at Kentucky. Yes. He can stay up there and win 7 or 8 ball games.
It'd be a long time before they wanted to run him off
and stay up there forever.
Yeah, it'd be a while before they'd run him off.
But then you go down to Alabama, and you got the man that's won you 6 national championships.
Well,
he's lost 2 games this year, and they're drawing lines in the sand about him making changes to his staff.
He's fussing with his own folks because he built that monster now.
Oh, I agree
that
with
monster
that.
was a monster before, and then it went dormant. Now he opened it back up.
Some of the fans were screaming they wanted change before the 2 games.
I get it. I get it, but come on, man. That's like I want a 98 Porsche to replace my 97 Porsche. I don't get it.
Well,
you have
as often as he's had to lose and change coordinators, Scott. As often as he had to, there's going to be that moment that you just didn't get the right guy in the same place like you had, and I don't think he doesn't have his best OC and he doesn't have his best DC that he's ever had, but he's just dealing with what he's got.
I saw a post on Facebook and it was some Alabama fan page, and the person wrote, it's good for a program like ours, or our program, however they worded it, not to win a championship every year. It helps us remember where we came from and where we were.
we came from.
And I responded.
I can hear your physical discomfort just talking about
where they came from, like they've been on the bottom.
Okay, first of all, I'm not even going to touch the arrogance it takes to make that statement, but I was like, look, if you're not trying to win a championship every single year, and if it doesn't hurt that you don't win a championship every year, That's your problem.
I hope the replacements that are looming out there for that Alabama job, I hope they're paying attention to, because even when Saban loses 2 games in the first 8,
well,
and they're
not happy.
All I'm going to say,
I said, I'm a Tennessee fan. I said, I hope for Alabama's sake that none of those players have that same attitude that you do. And I know Coach Saban doesn't have that attitude.
all I can say is simply,
but is a loss a good thing? No.
No, a loss is never a good thing, period. But, you look at Alabama, and I
haven't wrote them off. There's some mystery ways that they can find their way.
They're 4 points away from being undefeated.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, these
2 road losses.
We've got people talking
plays
about
of the game.
We got people talking about this garbage like they went out there and they're downtrodden, and I mean they lost by 2, a field goal and a single point. And you look at it and you're just like, are you friggin' kidding me? There are 100 other schools in America that would kill for that record and for that result. And you're sitting there, and that's why we were talking, me and Coach Campbell and a couple others at school the other day, we were talking about the college football playoff, and somebody said, do you think there's a chance that more than one SEC team get in? And I was like, of course I do. I think LSU is going to get the tiebreaker on the west side. They've got 2 losses right now. If they lose to Georgia, they're out. That's 3 losses. Sure. So a 2-loss Bama team that's only lost by 4 points could be sitting there in the wings, as well as a 1-loss Tennessee team that didn't make the championship game could be sitting there in the wings.
Who beat that
Alabama team? And I'm like, you give me a case that Michigan or Ohio State or TCU could run that murderer's row of Alabama, Tennessee, and Georgia and beat any of the 3 of them.
I think the national media don't want you to feel like that. Don't want you to take that in consideration. But I think there are people in that room, Scott, that do take that in consideration. That's
why they're playing up that second loss for Alabama so much, because they're trying. It's kind of like
they can't afford to lose another one.
No, they can't.
They can't drop another one.
They
for no reason.
Ole Miss
but what they're doing,
weekend it's over.
It's like a politician standing on the floor of the House, knowing that they can say whatever they want to because they're protected, and just throwing BS out there to try to get people looking the other way and not realize that Bama's got 2 losses, but like Scott said, they got 2 losses by 4 points.
On the road, both
on the
last
road,
play of the game.
Yeah, last play of the game.
And that's going to be part of the reasoning in that room, too.
Because you've got smart people in that room.
It should be part of that. And I know they're also going to be torn because, look, and I've said it, the goal of the college football playoff
is to put the best 4 there.
It's not to put the best 4 there.
But that's
what they tell you, to put the best 4 there. The goal of the college football playoff, listen to me closely, folks.
Money.
Who can draw the most TV ratings and who will sell the most tickets?
Yep.
Whose fan base is going to travel?
Well, you got to put.
That's
Alabama
why I never
in.
thought.
I made that same point.
That's why
it's not going to be a TCU fan base.
That's why I never thought a group of 5 team would ever make it. And Cincinnati kind of forced their hand last year because nobody else had that record. There were too many teams with 2 losses, and they kind of had to put them in there.
Yeah.
But if they can get, because Tennessee would sell it, Georgia would sell it, Alabama would sell it. Ohio State and or Michigan would sell it. Yep. They'll take those 4 teams in a heartbeat, and they'll justify it. You know how they justify it? All they have to do is say they passed the eye test. That's all they have to say. In our opinion, they passed the eye test.
Well, here's the thing.
There you go.
If you played the college football playoffs for the United States in friggin' United Arab Emirates, Alabama fans would find a way to get themselves there. Mm-hmm. If they had to hop a freight barge or fly in a C-130 or it doesn't matter. If they got to row their ass over there in a kayak, they're going to get over there, and it don't matter if they got to mortgage their damn house to buy those tickets. They're going to that game.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's not going to matter to the committee. I mean, Yeah, they may not want 3 SEC teams, but they know there's going to be 2 sellouts, plus a third with the championship
I
game.
literally said the same thing you just said to somebody the other day. I had somebody say,
I've said it since day one.
asking me this, that, or the
But
other,
even
and I
those
said,
two up north would do the
look,
same
I said
thing.
it doesn't matter. Alabama, no matter what, they will try to get them in there if possible, because you can guarantee if there are 472,000 tickets available, they're going to buy all 472,000 of them.
And I agree with both of you. Even if Alabama's sitting out there with 2 losses and somebody else is sitting there with 1, that argument about why Bama is needed to be visualized on TV for a game or 2 is an easy sell to those people, because they know what they're getting.
I've been telling this to people. I've been saying it and writing it. Why else? I mean, we had the first college football announcement of the top 6. What was it, the last weekend of October? They're going to do it for 6 weeks. And it's only the poll that comes out after the conference championship is the only one that actually matters. So why are we doing it for 5 weeks prior to that? Because there's an hour's worth of time on Tuesday night that ESPN can get as many college football people to watch, and they put it on there. It's for TV.
They knock the ratings out for that 1 hour, and they can call up Home Depot and say, hey, listen, man, now we know we only charge you $472,000 for the rest of Tuesday night, but for that 1 hour,
But if you want it for this hour.
You want it for that 1 hour, you better stroke us a check for 3.5.
Yep.
And Home Depot will go, all right, because they know.
But it is an important hour, and the context of those teams that they want to talk about is very, very important.
Yeah.
That's why some of those West Coast teams right now have a hard time finding their way into the mix, and even TCU will. You're right about Cincinnati. It kind of forced their hand because they hadn't lost, but then they didn't. They played Bama reasonably tough, and we know what Bama was doing. They were looking past that game. But I don't think they want to put a team in that 4 slot that they're just not certain will fit the bill.
Well, their worst nightmare's coming. I mean, if you really stop and you think about it, one of their worst nightmares is coming. You take Texas and Oklahoma, and now you include them into the SEC, and if they're able to recruit, which they already recruit awesomely, but if they're able to recruit with the cachet of being an SEC team, in addition to the fact that they are Texas and Oklahoma, and they make their way up that chart, you have a baker's dozen of teams that have a potential to come out of the same damn conference year in and year out. That's why they have to, and that's even the worst thing, because the bigger scare is, we're going to expand this thing out to 16. Well, how many teams do you think the SEC is going to have in that? You take it to 16 right now, and you bring potentially Ole Miss into play. You bring Mississippi. I mean, if you
were at 12 teams right now, you would have Georgia, Tennessee, LSU, Alabama, Ole Miss right off the bat.
Yep. And you could make a case for Kentucky.
That's almost half of the top 12.
Yep.
I mean, and like I said, it's probably only going to get worse, and eventually it's going to be.
I just told somebody a while back. I said, "Look, you." I have a friend that is a Michigan fan, and one of my kids at school, he's a Michigan fan. Last year, kept talking about that Georgia-Michigan game that was coming up, and I kept telling him, I was like, "Bud, you don't want none. You don't. Michigan's athletes are good, but Big Ten athletes aren't SEC athletes." Oh, no, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, I'm telling you.
Ohio State's are.
They were for a few years, but they're not going to be. They're not going to continually
down
be.
South getting half of that recruiting class.
Now, these other conferences, they just SEC linemen average 6'5", 290, and that's a small one.
Those are the ones that are coming in.
Yeah, I mean, those are the kids that get there as true
Tennessee
freshmen.
Just recruited a kid this week. I got him to sign 6'4", 335.
Yeah. Good God.
Yeah.
And
you imagine seeing that kid walking down a high school hallway.
In a high school.
I've told this story when Stump and I were doing one of the Tennessee football magazines. The year Eric Berry, we put him on the cover. It was his sophomore year. We went to Tennessee for media day. because B.J. Coleman was there, Jock McClendon, some others from around here were up there. And so I'm interviewing Jock McClendon from Baylor, who was an offensive lineman, 6'3", 325.
Yeah, big kid, big strong kid.
Big strong kid. I'm talking to him. Well, of course, if your offensive lineman is finally getting some media attention, guess who wants the media attention? The rest of the offensive line. So another one comes over. He's messing with him. And another one comes over. And another one comes over. And as I'm sitting there, and of course I'm 5'7", I start to realize everybody that came back was taller than the guy before. And I'm just like, wow, okay. And then finally the last guy came over, and I can't remember who the kid was. He was 6'8" and about 350 pounds. God. And there wasn't an ounce of fat on him.
And Pruitt made this statement, and this is one of the few things he was absolutely right about, but he made the statement that watching Tennessee before he got there, that they were too small and too slow to be in this league. Coach Jones, his wisdom, thought they didn't need to be a strength coach up there, so it is what it was. So, but
I can just hear Scott going.
You could identify. That was easy to identify.
I have said for 15 years, you fixed Tennessee's offensive line.
Yeah, you have
fixed Tennessee, and now they have finally fixed it. But I was just looking around. I'm like, how do you get this big at 20 years old, 21 at the most? And like I said, the last guy that came by was literally a head taller than anybody else.
Literally, the hand of the Lord just sits down and blesses you.
Shoulders were hurting trying to
from
get the
microphone up there.
It was like interviewing the late Coach Daniels five times.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
It's like
yeah.
God.
And what a sweet soul that we just brought up that name and Coach
you
Daniels. You
can't imagine how big SEC linemen are.
Well, the problem for people, it's like, if you've never been to it's the same difference as if you've never been to an NBA game. Because what happens is you're used to watching it on TV, and you watch them out on the court with them zoomed in on them, and you don't pay attention to the ref being around them. And then you go to an NBA game and you walk down on the floor as you're coming in, and they're out there warming up, and the smallest guy on the court is a foot taller than you are.
Yeah.
And there's guys walking out there that are 7'2", 7'4", and you're like, holy... we were in Disney a couple of years ago, coming out of Disney Springs, the little shopping area over there. And we encountered...
You ran into a 9-foot character.
We come out, we encountered the center at the time for the University of Miami's collegiate team.
Mm-hmm.
And he was 7'4", and I took a picture of the kids with him.
Oh, the basketball team. Yeah.
Basketball team.
Okay, thank you.
And this guy was the tallest human being I've ever laid eyes on in my life.
And let me bring you to this point. Let me try to date myself. I'm going to say at 1980. I'm going to say 86, but I'm not far off. Flying back from Memphis, Tennessee to Chattanooga, and none other are the Indiana Pacers flying with me to meet the Hawks in a preseason game. Now, that was what was their All-American guard?
1986. That's
Reggie
Miller.
Reggie
Miller. Right. Reggie Miller.
Chuck Person.
Reggie Miller sat right next to me, and he made the statement, and I knew who he was because I knew he was All-American. He made the statement, before the season's over, I'm going to be starting. I'm not starting now. Well, probably 4 games in, he was probably starting. Yeah. But the thing I was going to say is, when the smallest
Smith was on that
Rick
team.
Smith was the Duncan Dutchman.
But when the smallest guy on
Chuck Person, the rifleman.
On the team 6'3",
yeah,
and it's 6'3" to 7'3",
yeah.
Football teams don't exactly look like that because these guys are really tall and lean.
Mark Jackson was on that team eventually.
Yeah.
Golly, you think
good players? Man.
Yeah, they were. That was Mark.
And
Dominique
still playing
team.
for the.
Dominique was still with the Hawks. That was before they made that horrible trade to who'd they trade? Where did Danny Manning come from? They traded him. Was that Phoenix? No, not Phoenix.
Danny Manning.
Yeah, they brought Danny Manning in and traded Nick away, and I can't remember where Manning was.
I know Dominique ended up. He
ended up with the Celtics, and he played with the Celtics too.
What Manning
was San Antonio?
I don't think it was San Antonio.
I was going to say San Antonio, or was it Phoenix?
I think it was. I'm pretty sure it was Phoenix for some reason.
It might have been. Well, I tell you what. Well, you're looking
That's
at
pretty good
Go
if we
ahead.
guessed it right that far back, and not be basketball fans.
We've got some high school
Well,
football
Scott and I
games
are,
tomorrow
so.
night, and there's some big ones. First week.
Clippers. He was a Clipper.
That's right. He was a Clipper. God, they were.
So we stood.
And he only played in Atlanta for that one season that he got traded, and then he went to Phoenix
so
and
technically,
played.
I was right. We didn't know anything.
No.
We'll start with the Georgia, and we'll get back to Tennessee. Georgia, first round, Class 1A Division I, Athens Christian at Darlington. Commerce at Tryon ought to be a real interesting ball game. Pepperell at Elbert County, and Dade County has to go to Rabun County. That's the team that put 72 up against Adairsville in week 2. So good luck to the Wolverines. Class 1A Division II, Aquinas at Bowden, Washington Wilkes at Mount Zion of Carroll, and Christian Heritage at Greene County. Class 2A, East Jackson at Rockmart. God, I should have proofread this before I posted it. It's not Union County, it's Union County at Model. Athens Academy at Fannin County. North Murray has to travel to Friendship Christian. Now, Class 3A, Douglas at Adairsville. Top-ranked Cedar Grove will host Bremen. Number 3 ranked Sandy Creek will host Kahula Creek. And number 4 ranked Carver of Atlanta will come to Ringgold.
And what was Carver Atlanta's record, Scott?
6-3.
6-3.
Their losses were to Sandy Creek, to Cedar Grove, and to some team called Buford.
Yeah, I mean, those 3 losses, man, that just...
I mean, they're a number 3 seed and they're ranked 4th in the state. What does that tell you? They were state runner-up last year to Cedar Grove.
Okay.
Now, any question why Bremen wanted out of that region? If they could have beat Douglas, they could have played Adairsville.
But my Ringgold Tigers
are
are not waving the white flag.
No. But it is going to be tough. Class 4A, Cedar
The
Shoals.
proverbial uphill climb.
Yeah, we'll settle for that.
Cedar Shoals at Cedar Town. Madison County at Central of Carrollton. Heritage will travel to Walnut Grove. That's in Loganville, which is a little bit north and east of Atlanta, not quite to Athens. Sonoraville gets to go to North Oconee, which they're 10-0 and steamrolling people. East Side at Calhoun in 5A. Clark Central at Cartersville. Dalton travels to Loganville, which is where Walnut Grove is. So, get tired of watching Dalton or Heritage play, just go across town. You can see the other one play. Cass at Jefferson. Paulding County at Rome in Class 6A. And then 7A. I wrote this down. These two teams have never met before. So that'll be an interesting matchup. Lowndes at Carrollton.
Well, two recognizable squads.
Yeah, Lowndes only 5-5 on the year, and of course Carrollton has one of the top freshman quarterbacks in the nation.
And some of those games, you didn't mention it just then, but some of them are played on Saturday, and Ringo being one of them.
Yeah, and I think they're actually going to do that for the first
2 rounds?
3 rounds.
3 rounds.
Just to make sure they got enough qualified officials. I think Class 5A, Class 3A, and maybe one more will be played on Saturday. 4A will be played on Friday, because I'm actually going down to Walnut Grove myself tomorrow to watch that one. Then I'll be at Ringgold on Saturday night. Hopefully it won't be as cold as what they're thinking it's going to be. We kind of got lucky this year with the weather.
Yeah, we've gotten real fortunate with
it. It's about to be. It's about to be. Let's see. This is not what I was looking for. Dadgummit.
2 of the coldest games. One you was with me. Heritage at Northwest a few years ago, down there at Northwest. That windy, cold, brutal night. The other 2 games both had Boyd Buchanan involved on Signal Mountain. And back when they were steamrolling, Boyd came up there to them, and boy, that was miserably cold night.
The 2 coldest ones we ever went to was the Boyd Buchanan CAK game up in Knoxville. You weren't with us
I didn't go to
night.
that.
Me, Rusty, and Steve Lewis was, and it was a freak snowstorm blew in, because it was supposed to be in like the 50s, and all of a sudden it dropped into the 20s.
And then the worst thing if you show up unprepared with the wrong clothes.
Which we pretty much were. And then one year I covered I covered Twiggs County at Gordon Lee in the playoffs on Friday night, and the next night I went to Marist to watch them play LFO. This was about 20 years ago. And in a cinder block press box with no window panes and only one metal folding chair that was half broken and half rusted out, and it was like a wind tunnel in there. The wind was blowing about 40 miles an hour that night. It was about 30 degrees.
That's why they call it a press box.
Well, they gave us, our company had these little, I don't remember, the mail station things. So you're supposed to be able to type email.
Mail station.
Mine froze.
Oh, wow.
I called
We were
them,
talking about some of the coldest games we've been at the last few years. And
I'll tell you right now, Scott will back me up on this. There is never one that will take the place of
Boyd and CAK.
Boyd and CAK.
Yeah.
I had Boyd and Silver.
You didn't hear me. I said that's the closest one I've ever been.
Oh.
I had Boyd and Signal Mountain up on the mountain one night, and it just didn't come close to.
There was 1 year, one of the Boyd years at Murfreesboro was pretty bad.
Oh, the one they won.
The one they won was pretty brutal. I mean, we were that one was bad. I mean, I was trying to think. We had
5-6 layer night.
Yeah, there was one. I'm trying to think. You and me have done several that were really bad over the years. I mean, not all Tennessee ones either. We did some Georgia games that were just. I think we did one at Lafayette one night that was pretty bad. The wind got to howling down. I mean,
this was Halloween.
That game
night
in Hawkinsville was cold down there.
Cold.
That Gordon Lee Hawkinsville game.
This was Halloween night about 4 or 5 years ago, and just a quick clipper came through here. I was actually at Silverdale and Boyd. Boyd won the ball game, and it had no business being as cold and windy as it was, and it happened to be a Halloween night. But it caught everybody off guard. Not fit for man nor beast to be standing out there talking to somebody.
That South Pitt
Greenback game.
just a couple of years ago that we went to, that one was brutal.
And we are fortunate. We don't have to deal much with those.
No, we do not. It's always late in the season when we have to deal with those.
And then last year, one of the coldest games probably was right down to the last week or two of playoffs. But then we had the state championship, and it was
75-degree weather. Yeah. Speaking of South Pittsburgh, they will be at home against Gordonsville. Big game coming up on Friday night. The winner will get either Whitwell or Clay County. If Whitwell wins,
Gordonsville's a former state champ themselves. I believe.
It says this part of the bracket is designated home team, but I'm wondering if it's whoever's the top seed, if the top seed will still host, or I'm not exactly sure how it works in Tennessee. But Whitwell will travel to Clay County, and South Pittsburgh will be home to Gordonsville. That's in Class 1A. In Class 2A, we still have Tyner hosting Westmoreland, a 6-4 Westmoreland team. I don't see any reason why Tyner can't win that ball game. Then you got Bledsoe County going to East Robertson. The winner of those two games will meet. Hopefully, it'll be Tyner and Bledsoe County, but if not, there's East Robertson, and I'm not sure. It looks like Tyner would have to travel for that game, but we'll see what happens there. Class 3A, two semi-local teams. McMinn Central heading to Sweetwater to take on the Tigers, and then the other game, the winners will be against Loudoun or Giles County. Class 4A, East Hamilton will be at home against Upperman. Then Red Bank will be on the road at Stone Memorial. So the winners of those two games will take on each other. Class 5A, Walker Valley will travel up to Knoxville to take on Powell. McMinn County will be home to battle Oak Ridge. And like I said, the winners of those two games will face each other. So we could have another Walker Valley McMinn County game in the quarterfinals if both those teams were to win. 6A, nobody else from around here is still in the playoffs. Bradley Central was the only one we had, and they are now done. Franklin Road Academy is coming down to Chattanooga Christian. This is Division II, Class 2A. Winner of that one will take on either Lucon or CPA in the semifinals. So these are the quarterfinals that are coming up. And, of course, you also got Silverdale and they are playing at Lipscomb Academy.
Can I ask you a question based on that?
Yeah.
I've heard two different versions. CCS, are they in the opposite?
They are opposite bracket of Lipscomb.
Somebody told me that they were in the same and they would meet in the semis if they could get there.
They will actually play. They would play in the championship game if they both meet, or Chattanooga Christian can play Silverdale.
And you've already seen where Lipscomb next year is up with the big boys.
Yeah, and they probably need to be at this point.
Yeah, they do.
And then, of course, Division II, Class 3A. I'll just run down all the quarterfinals for you since only 4 of them. Christian Brothers at MBA. McCallie travels to Innsworth. So McCallie may get another shot at NBA in the semifinals. MUS will be playing here at Baylor, and then the winner of that game will take on either Pope John Paul or Brentwood Academy in the other semifinal. So we could have a McCallie Baylor showdown in Finley on
and let me say this: don't for the folks that might not be keeping up with it,
it's going to happen.
I think that McCallie can't get back there. They do have a little bit of the heart of the road to Hall, but they lost 2 games, one to NBA and one to Baylor. And really, since speaking to some of their coaches recently, they can narrow it down to just a few plays.
Yeah, they had every chance to win that NBA game. They were leading.
Up to 6 minutes in the Baylor game, they were leading.
I think you got 3 teams. I think you got NBA. I think you've got Baylor and McCallie. I think they're all right there together.
I think they're very close to
Put a blanket over them. They're that close in talent, and it's going to be a play or two here, like it was. Both times they've.
That's exactly the way it's probably going to play out. Sure is.
Well, guys,
we haven't covered yet.
No, I was going to say. I mean, hell, I think we've ran the gamut at this point. Go ahead.
It's on our side. I'm trying to. Every time I've seen where a kid is signed, I'm putting it out there on Scenic City Sports on Facebook. So if we haven't gotten to yours, we apologize. I'm doing my best to try to find.
We're getting there.
But congratulations to Brody Malone, the kid from Tryon. World champion on the high bar in men's gymnastics.
Wow.
First time that American male has won that since Kurt Thomas in 1979. Jim Cotta himself.
Wow.
And kids,
Jim Cotta, my God, that's a blast from the past.
I wonder if Brody Malone will be part of Jim Cotta 2.
Jim Cotta 2, the revenge.
But man, to be a world champion at
anything,
that's incredible, and to have him right down the road.
As we're getting ready to leave off the show tonight, I'm going to bring up the joke that I made on Facebook this week, and not everybody got it, but I hope those of a certain age have enjoyed these particular. There is a food establishment out there right now that is running ads for a sandwich, and it is a Diablo sandwich. And my question when I saw that is, when you buy this Diablo sandwich, does it come with a Dr. Pepper to go because you're in a hurry? And those of you out there that know that joke are laughing like hell right now because
we've been running with that thing.
We have ran with that for well over a week now.
And if you do like Dr.
Where's
Pepper,
the can?
I got to take a squirt.
What time of day should you be drinking it?
What's that?
A Dr. Pepper.
I would figure
there's one of 3 times you can drink that.
10, 2, and 4. Scott was onto it.
10, 2, and 4.
That was their old slogan back in the day. Have one at 10, 2.
10, 2, and 4.
I've been to the Dr. Pepper Museum down in Waco, and they're talking about how they serve it hot.
Well, folks,
Christmas
that is no different than if you go to Ireland or England or Scotland and you buy Guinness. They sell it 3 different temperatures. They sell it cold, lukewarm, and room temperature.
So I can take me Dr. Pepper, pour it in a glass, put it in the microwave for 3 minutes, and
heat it up slowly with some spices and some lemon and some cinnamon and stuff. That's the way they do. You can find the recipe on that.
Well, guys, thank you for tuning in with us. We appreciate everything. We appreciate all of our sponsors who are out there that take care of us on a weekly basis. We will catch you guys sometime next week.